MAS is very pleased to continue the long tradition of the Arts Forum, supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. So thank you, DCA, for making this event possible. Since 1990, the Arts Forum has brought the best and brightest in arts innovators in all disciplines to a broad audience. And we are proud to continue this legacy. And a person who has worked for many years in stewarding the Arts Forum program is now a member of MAS, and that is Ann Coates. And Ann is someplace down in the front. There she is. Thank you, Ann Coates, for your leadership. As you may know, MAS is a membership organization, which is important because it means our work reflects what matters to New Yorkers, to you, especially on issues that affect the livability and resilience of the city. I hope we can count on you to attend our dynamic programming, and if you're not already a member of MAS, I hope you'll become one tonight. As a member, you can participate directly in shaping the livability agenda for this city and hold us accountable for ensuring our research, community training, convening, and public programming efforts reflect your concerns. It's a busy, busy spring for MAS with a full slate of programs as we enter our 120th year. Like, that's 1893 for those of you counting. Leadership, where does time go? For a vision for the future of the city that enhances livability for all New Yorkers. In fact, this Friday, as I said, is our 120th birthday. Here are some highlights for MAS this spring. On April 2nd, MAS is hosting a screening of Envisioning Home, a documentary about legendary public housing reformers Richard Barron and Jean King, who will be on hand for a discussion with NYCHA Chairman John Rhea following the film. In our next Arts Forum, titled Grand Central, Designed for the Next Century, will be held on April 9th at Grand Central, and will convene world-renowned designers to consider how we can foster a more livable, more efficient, better East Midtown through design. Registration just opened today, and it's already off the hook, right? How many?
There are more than 500 registers.
Like in 2 minutes. So if you want to come, like, get out your devices now. But there's like, you can register with people here, like our people, like everywhere. So we hope you'll come. Then the first weekend of May is the annual MAS-hosted Jane's Walks, New York City. More than 100 free neighborhood walks in all 5 boroughs honoring the legacy of Jane Jacobs and led by New Yorkers like you. You can visit mas.org to find a walk that interests you, or if you are interested in hosting a walk, which is a really great and cool thing to do, and I invite you to do that. I did one that's really terrific to do. We have forms here for you today to sign up for that. Also that weekend, we're excited to be presenting an event as part of the new museum's Ideas City Festival with our friends at Architizer. Pitching the City will be an opportunity to hear innovative city building ideas, and then after a commentary from a panel of jurors, the audience will vote for its favorite idea. And on June 13th, MAS will honor the Rockefeller Foundation on the occasion of its 100th anniversary with the 2013 Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Medal for the foundation's outstanding contributions to New York City and urban areas around the globe. You can sign up for and find out more information about all of these events online at mas.org. Now on to tonight's panel. MAS advocates for a city where the arts and culture flourish, where they can lead in community revitalization and stabilization, where the arts contribute to the livability, resilience, and sustainability of New York. In fact, MAS, along with the Brownsville Partnership and Community Solutions, is working in Brownsville, Brooklyn to create positive, sustained change through interventions to the built environment and through the arts. With the Brownsville Partnership, we're creating art destinations in vacant storefronts and abandoned lots along a 6-block corridor in that neighborhood. We know that arts and culture unite communities. They provide the glue that brings neighbors together and are key ingredient in the recipe of neighborhood pride, cohesion, economic activity, and vibrancy. And we know that true resiliency of any community depends on a holistic integration of infrastructure, amenities, and services. we at MAS are hearing this on the ground in the many resilience workshops we've been convening and helping to facilitate around the city. So we're here tonight to hear from the people who are fostering neighborhood vibrancy and building resilience through the arts. So please join me in welcoming our panel. And you guys can just come up as I mention you. Lisa Kim is the Director of Cultural Affairs for Two Trees Management Company, a real estate development company responsible for many developments in DUMBO, as we all know, and the owner of this very building. Lisa manages Two Trees arts initiatives and cultural philanthropy. Sixten Kai Nielsen and Martin Rosengaard established the art group Wulu in 2002. Since 2002, Wulu has been operating wulu.org, an online community for participatory projects. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Lisa. Kemi Ilesanmi, I just practiced this with you and I already messed it up, is the executive director of the Laundromat Project. Prior to joining the LP, she was director of grants and services at Creative Capital Foundation. Ilesanmi. I wouldn't have slept if I didn't nail that. Dustin Yellin lives and works in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and has been exhibiting art worldwide in solo and group exhibitions since 2001. Dustin is also the founder of the new art space in Red Hook named the Intercourse. And our moderator, Richard Flood, is the Director of Special Projects and Curator at Large at the new museum. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, panel, and over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, and happy birthday. Welcome, and thank you all for coming. It's great to look out on so many people who are interested in the vitality of our city and the future of our city. I just want to give a brief plug for an upcoming initiative at the new museum, and that is called Ideas City. And it begins on May 1 and goes through May 4. And it's a series of a keynote address, 5 panels, a day of workshops, and a day of an incredible street festival. So we'd love to see you down along the Bowery. In the meantime, we're gathered here to talk about, among other things, resilience. And to test my own response to the word, I thought I'd try and write my description before torturing the panelists to come up with their description. Resilience is a big word, big in its implication of heroism, survival, beating the odds, and enduring. Resilience suggests that something daunting has been overcome. It's not a good word for small triumphs or minor victories. This year, our city sustained a series of potentially cataclysmic acts of nature and is still exacting a terrible toll. The spirit of resilience was tested over and over, but held. Amid the frustration and hopelessness and endless waiting, people stayed the course, prevailed, and chose life. That is the essence of resilience, to me. But to open it up, I'd really like to ask my fellows to just give what their understanding of the word is, because it's a kind of beautiful and not very well used word. So can I start with you, Dustin?
Oh, boy. I guess you could. Well, resilience, I don't know. I guess I think about not dying. This is the first thing that comes to my mind. With the arts, I think of perseverance. I think of never ever ceasing to continue with what you're doing. You know, when I talk to younger artists, I say, well, how do I do it? How do I make a living making art, or how do I continue on this trajectory? I say, well, it's not really a choice. If you never can give up. You can never stop. You can never question it. And if you think about it too much, you'll die trying. So when I think about resilience, that's what I think about. I really just think about not dying. I think about reinventing and reinvigorating and recreating and rebuilding and restructuring yourself constantly?
I was certainly thinking about this word the last few days, and particularly thinking about, okay, so there's sustainability and livability and vibrancy and vitality and resilience. These are all words that have kind of bubbled up in the consciousness over, or sometimes reappeared over time, and they're all, you know, kind of facets of the same puzzle, which are all about how do we create and sustain, or create communities where we can get through the good times and the bad, because we know that hopefully there'll be some of both, but we certainly know that there's usually kind of those down moments. And one of the things that I really think about in connection to resiliency in particular is flexibility, adaptability, resources, networks, like having a weave, something that's there that one can kind of bounce against and be able to kind of move in a variety of directions. And it's what we see again and again when we do manage to you know, come back from things like Sandy. So I'll just leave it at that for the moment.
Yeah, English is my second language, so I had to look it up. Sometimes that's a good idea. I mean, in Danish we don't have, I'm from Denmark, we don't have that exact word. But looking into it, I kind of found this meaning of a post I once had that I thought was beautiful, of this graffiti from Paris in '68, where it was a slogan from the student revolves, survivre ce n'est pas vivre, which basically means surviving is not living. And maybe that's that space, a bit like Dustin was saying, that once you survive, then what do you do? Because surviving is obviously not enough. So I guess that.
So I think when you think about the word resilience, I think of resistance, and you need resistance in order to build strength. It's a basic tenet in working out, right? So you have to work with resistance, and you have to tear your muscles in order to build your muscles. And I think very much about what you said about not dying. It's you know, what don't kill you is going to make you stronger. Resilience has a beautiful sound, very much about bouncing back. It's the opposite of rigidity. And I think that's a major life tenet for everybody. You have to be able to bounce back from whatever situation it is.
We were talking earlier about a little bit about the names of the different organizations that are involved. And I want to go, before we come back to resilience, as we will over and over and over again, I want to ask the panelists to just talk a little bit about the name of their organization and what it means to them, because I think inherent in the name of an organization, it's going to tell you 1,000 different things about what those organizations want to do. I mean, at the New Museum, our mission statement is new art, new ideas, which doesn't tax any of us to a memory feat and spiel out a paragraph. It's beautiful. But Kemi, let's start with the Laundromat Project.
So let's see. The Laundromat Project could be many different things, right? Just those three words together. However, it is grounded in something that certainly in cities like New York, people kind of understand or have some associations with the idea of a laundromat being a community gathering space. So for us, kind of tying to mission, since you brought that up with the New Museum, we really want to activate this space that has a cross-section of people in neighborhoods kind of passing through or passing by or having access to as a creative space, and a space where we can kind of connect with neighbors and work together to envision our own or re-envision our own communities. So for us, it's very much about meeting people where they are and bringing artists and those who may not think of themselves as artists but have creative capacity together. And that becomes kind of, the laundromat becomes kind of that watering hole that's waiting to have, or that has a number of different possibilities, one of which is activating creativity.
Martin, and I'd like it if you would also talk about the hotel project.
Yes.
So I'm representing Wulu, and Wulu is an art collective. And when we finished school in the early 2000s, we wanted to create a website. That sounded like a great idea, and this was before Facebook and MySpace, of course. So this idea of a social network online for the arts community seemed like a really new thing. So we started programming that, and we had to buy a domain name. And we didn't want to call it anything with art or similar, so we found this word. We were traveling around the world at this time, and we came to Australia. And in Sydney, there is a suburb called Woolloomooloo. And that had so many O's in it that it was wonderful. Because like O's are almost like, doors. I love that door in The Hobbit, that round one. You can go in of them, out of them, and you came out of one and you want to go back in. And I mean, it was just great. And then we found out that this word exists in the South Pacific area, up to Korea, like Aboriginal Australia. And in that section of the world, it means where individual energy becomes one thing. So it can be a delta area where the river becomes the sea, or it can be a lot of people on the subway moving as one body. So that we were called Woolloomooloo to begin with, but people never could get it right, so we cut it down to Wooloo. So practical meets ideological, and the reason why I'm sitting here right now is due to a project that is launching during the New Museum Festival called Human Hotel, and it is hopefully very explained in that name. It's a humane hotel. It's a hotel that doesn't charge any money, and it's a residency program where artists who are traveling can stay locally in the place where they're working. Not just to save money and resources, but mostly to create better art projects for the kind of art that needs public and local engagement.
Thanks. And can I ask you, I'm sure that the name is a part of a branding exercise, but we are all branding all the time, so I would welcome your thoughts.
Well, Two Trees is the company name. And it's the company name for the real estate development company that is the leading and the founding sponsor responsible for developing this neighborhood. I can't explain where Two Trees comes from, to tell you the truth.
It implies that there are gardens, perhaps forests.
And the company is run by father and son, so there are two very strong trees at the helm. It's interesting that you talk about naming and identity, because for what I do, which is not real estate at all, but relating specifically to support for arts and culture, we've been struggling with how we identify the group of the arts and cultural group here, right? There used to be an identity here called Culture 411, which is an old term to talk about information, right? So we gave up on Culture 411, but how do we define this cultural group here? And we're actually in the middle of this process now. So I'm open to suggestions if after this anybody has any ideas.
Or are you looking for a logo?
Well, the logo will come after the name, but I think a name first to really solidify what's going on here with the vast number of arts groups and the artists who are here, which is part of what we do to support here.
Great, thank you. There's a lot of money in branding, and so I'd get on that one. Dustin, I actually raised the question for you, who seem to be on. Well, it seems resolved from when we first began talking to before we came up on the stage. But could you tell folks about the Intercourse?
Sure, I could try. Well, the Intercourse is a what is it? It's a lot of things in one thing. So the name, we have a publication, sort of a cultural arts and music and whatnot publication that comes out of the project called Intercourse magazine. And we're building something much larger than just a publication. It's very hard to explain, but it's kind of like if you were to take a lot of hallucinogens and lay down on a grass field and like think of the craziest possible art space that could exist and what would it have and who would be there. That's what we're doing. So we have an exhibition space that's on the scale of a museum, like Mass Smoke or something like that. It's a very large exhibition space. The building was built in 1866, and we've been renovating it for about a year and a half, so it was in complete disrepair. And this year we put in 100 windows and stripped the whole building and brought in utilities. So it acts as an exhibition space / museum, whatever you want to call that, a residency program for artists, scientists, musicians, writers, all working side by side. We have, up to 10 residencies going simultaneously. So you'll have a geneticist working next to a sculptor, working next to a painter, and so on. And then there's a school. So the next group of classes start in when is it? Next month, April, because we got a little bit of water with that flood, and so we've been swimming, so to speak. But we got through that. So we have about 30 classes starting. So it's a school, a museum, and a residency program, a performance space, and a sculpture garden. There's all in all about 50,000 square feet, half of that being outdoor, which was a parking lot, which we've built hills, and we've planted an orchard, and we've started putting sculpture out there. So it's a sculpture garden. So it's this very strange, bucolic, I guess it's the word, environment inside Brooklyn, along with this crazy institution. And we call it Intercourse because, that was the magazine. Well, let's just call it the Intercourse because it's all about an intercourse between disciplines, sort of the way Thomas Paine used the word, or God in the Bible, or lots of people. But I guess in this generation, people think intercourse is sex. So this, I have to make a board. I'm making these boards, like a board of directors, an advisory board, blah, 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 all these things. We're just getting together. And it's kind of divided, and people think intercourse might freak some people out. So I have to kill my darlings, because I like that name. And I think it's pretty memorable, usually. Yeah, I hope so. And anyways, Civil War building. The building was originally Pioneer Iron Works in 1866. The street was William Street, was named Pioneer Street after the building. So now we're going to, I think, call it Pioneer Works. And keep it simple like that. We'll keep all the publishing as Intercourse Publishing, but we'll be Pioneer Works as a sort of institution. And our board has just gotten started, and I brought Alana Heiss on the board as kind of like a mentor, just to bounce ideas off of, because she made PS1, which is something I've looked up to as a great example. And then there's different artists like David Brooks or Carol Beauvais on our artist advisory board, and we're just getting this whole thing going, and it's all been very grassroots. I've been funding it with my art, which is just bananas. It's like it's just crazy. So we're slowly getting that to stop, but it's been a beautiful spiritual way to give birth to an institution that's just beginning.
Are you incorporated as a not-for-profit?
In about this week, yeah. We're just getting all our papers done. Yes, we are.
So the commitment is enormous for you, and
it's bananas. I look at it like a Boisean social sculpture, and the more you look at it like that, the more you want to do it. The more I'm like, I love making my work, and I'm entrenched in a couple of installations that they take 3 or 4 years to do one installation. I'm crazy about it, but this is becoming so big and affecting so many people besides me that you get obsessed, and you start reading about boys, more boys, and that kind of ideology, and then you just get taken away.
And are you working with a staff?
Well, I have
I hate to think that you were mentoring all of these projects.
I have a group of people that assist me and work with me on my art, and they've all been working on the institution. And now we're slowly getting funding to hire a director, and we're separating my private practice and this public institution as fast as possible, because if not, it's bananas.
Right.
But
right.
So the answer is yes. There's about a dozen of us, and then a bunch of interns.
So I'm beginning to suspect that when it comes to funding, how do you do it?
That other language I'm so good at. I write applications in Danish, and no. I mean, it's mostly our practice for the past 10 years has definitely been very sort of European funded. I mean, it's a bit like that book that goes around so much at the moment, Claire Bishop's Artificial Health. She's talking so much about this kind of European social practice, and I feel in some ways that it's only really coming to America in recent years. I mean, yes, I mean, I think the Queen's Museum is doing well at taking up some of this work and creative time, and there's some stuff happening, but it's been, yeah, very sort of welfare state based.
But who, for example, who do you look to as sponsors that have been with you over time?
I mean, for this human hotel project, I mean, sustainability is always so important for resilience. So for the Human Hotel Project, I mean, the idea would be to eventually go and talk to organizations about the amount of their budget being used on accommodation, hotels basically. Mm-hmm. And what can we do within that bracket? Similar to what I feel, I mean, Wage, Working Artists for Great Economy are looking at, I mean, organizations, where is that thing in your budget saying this is what artists get? In the same way that little, which is not so little, the accommodation is often a kind of a bigger part of a stay. How can we use that maybe more intelligently and making that fund the project? Because if there's some Danish check paying for it, that's not how it should be. You know, it should eventually be its own thing. The same with the website I was talking about before. That is running its own thing now. I mean, nobody is paid to work on it, but we have a lot of people coming from around the world to intern on it because they think it's great, and they get maybe some university points out of it, and there's a little sort of revenue stream that pays for the servers and stuff.
Right. And Kemi, as a former grants officer, now being the one who's doing the asking, but also still awarding, how does it go for you?
Well, yes, it is different on this side of things. We have been lucky because going back to the name, the Laundromat Project, it is one of those ideas that really people kind of get on some like basic level very quickly and kind of resonates with people, which has been exciting to be part of, and also to be able to share with others. But basically, as far as our funding, most of our funding comes through various foundations, and the organization was founded by a woman named Risa Wilson, who is an amazing Brooklynite and New Yorker who had this idea in 1999, was based in Philadelphia, moved to New York, and kind of was able to birth this idea here, and started with very little money. Being the very first season in 2006, she talked, and I was on the board then actually. It was about $1,000. The organization had been incubated by Echoing Green. And over time, we've attracted and been able to kind of retain support from places like the Landman Foundation, which really cares about arts at the intersection of social change, the Andy Warhol Foundation, which paid my salary at my former job as well, Creative Capital. And this year we received a Rockefeller Cultural Innovation Grant. So it's been a really interesting mix of folks. But one of the things that I think is one of my challenges, and I came on as the first full-time and paid executive director in September, so just over 6 months ago, even though we've been incorporated since 2005, and our staff tripled. We had a program manager who's been on staff for 4 years, but I came on as an executive director, and we also got a programming assistant. So capacity-wise and just our ability to do things and think and be able to actually follow that with some action, amazing. But I think it's really important for us to connect to communities, the communities that we're working in, and get support from them. Like Vin was just talking about this being a membership organization, not necessarily needing a membership model, but ways of opening up space for various people to be able to support the project. So we have a special edition print series that we use, where we commission prints from people like Micheline Thomas and Dred Scott and younger artists like Jason Keeling, and receive, raise money that way. We also Anyway, we have a number of ideas about how we can kind of connect on a much more grassroots level. And even last year, was one of the things I really promoted was like, we have a wish list. We have other ways that people can support us. And a number of our artists were able to support us in those ways that might not have been able to write a check. So very much kind of opening up what the idea of support is and really wanting, going back to that idea of a network and weaving together the various people who care about what we do and wanting to open up spaces for people to feel a sense of ownership and be able to participate in making us who we are.
And Lisa, what is key in your role in terms of, with DoubleTree, in terms of how you can undergird the arts around you? Are you a funding organization as well?
We are. I mean, we support with financial help, but we also help, I mean, with what we have most in our inventory, which is space. When you look around, so I think there's about 3 million square feet of commercial and residential space that Two Trees owns and manages in this neighborhood. Of that, about half is commercial, and of that, I would say the latest number is probably close to around 10 or 12%. Of that space is given over to arts groups and nonprofits and artist studios and residency groups. Some are free and some are at a, certainly way below market rent. So we support the arts in that way through space donations, through certainly through fiscal sponsorship, but also the big thing about what we are able to do, and I think, is about building a sense of community here within the arts groups. We all know each other. It's a tiny neighborhood here, and we all know what each group does and what's going on. We keep tabs with each other. I mean, we're a tiny staff. I have one person, Kate, who works with me, and we are basically on the ground all the time, walking around the neighborhood, talking to people, figuring out what's going on. We spread the news about what's going on here to each other and also to a broader audience because we feel that it supports them. Social media and marketing support. Connections for, I joke and I say this is very much a borrow a cup of sugar kind of neighborhood, and it's that. In the gallery space that we walk through and where we have pop-up exhibitions and people come in, they call and say, hey, do you have furniture or a ladder or paint? And you can just turn to the person who's next door to you and borrow those things. And everybody supports each other. We all go out to each other's events. We vote with our feet and support the groups here.
I'm curious, at the museum over the course of a year, we do 4 workshops where we invite in people who seem to have compelling information that we're unlikely to possess. And one of the things that has been coming up repeatedly in the last 2 workshops is the whole concept of mixed use. It's turned into a really, really enormous topic. And I wonder, within the corporation, is mixed use an issue? Is it something that is on the table for discussion?
I think it's actually part of the core of the company's mission. When you look at the history of this neighborhood, this was a manufacturing area. These buildings around you, these warehouses and factories which were built at the turn of the century, were empty. Manufacturing died here in the 40s and 50s, and everyone moved away. In the 60s to 70s, this was when artists started to move in here and take over the spaces because they were vacant and it was cheap. Nobody wanted to be here. This is where the mob dumped bodies by the river and wild dogs roamed the streets. We're geographically isolated between the 2 bridges and the BQE. We're down the hill. We're a little protected zone. And so when David Valentis came here in 1980 and saw what could be possible here and what we're sitting in today, he had that long-term vision. But when he bought the 10 or 12 buildings here in 1980, everything was zoned for manufacturing, and there was no manufacturing coming in, or like today, there was no manufacturing coming in or growing at that time. So he had to sit and wait for 15, 16 years until zoning laws could change for commercial and residential. And what he was able to do, what the family was able to do is, because they had so much property here, is slowly develop the neighborhood. But in developing the neighborhood, they understood that to build a community, you had to provide resources. Part of that was done by welcoming services. So Peas and Pickles was here. They were enticed here to come at a reduced rent to set up shop here so that they could set up a market to provide a service for the people who were here and to attract more people. The arts groups who were here were asked to stay here. They were continued to be given space grants and funding and support. So they very much has been massaging the support of the arts here. When you look at the neighborhood, there is a vibrant daytime office community. So you have the workers who come in off the F train, all the workers who work in tech and digital and new media and advertising, architects, graphic designers, artists, they all converge here. With the increase of residential spaces here, you have a nighttime community. So from day to night, you have people on the street here. And I think that's very much a part of the core mission of the company. And I think anybody who spends any time here feels that and feels the energy and the kind of the vibrancy that is in this neighborhood.
What about Red Hook? What about Red Hook? I mean, I think it's probably one of the most physically compelling areas of the city, one of the hardest to get in and out of areas of the city, and yet that's where you've planted your heart, clearly. What are the challenges and what are the thrills of marrying Red Hook?
It's a good question. I don't know. I just fell in love with it. I went there the city got too expensive. I went to make art there. I was one of these guys who lived in the city. I was like, I'll never move to Brooklyn. I was like, I'll move upstate to the woods. When I was younger and a boy, and then I couldn't do the work in the city anymore. So I made a studio in Red Hook and I commuted. And then I was like, I can't commute. I need to be closer to the studio. So I'll move out there and just be near my studio, even if I don't like it. And I did that. And then I slowly just fell in love with it. Now I'm one of those guys who's like, I'm never going to live in the city, ever again. Go figure. And for us, it's like a little fishing village. It's we have water all the way around us and within us, and there's just this. It feels like I grew up in the mountains in Colorado, and so it feels like a small town. It feels like a little tiny town at the abyss of this great big city, and so I just fell in love with it for that reason. And the challenge is, people would say, "Oh, it's so unsafe." When I got there, and I was afraid. They made me feel like they killed the principal. You got to be careful, It's actually, I've never had an issue, so it's really safe. And as far as people getting there, like when we have only had a couple large exhibitions open up, we thought, maybe 150 people would come. We had no idea. 700 people show up to the exhibitions, and people. It's not that far, really. It just feels far because what's that guy, Moses? Is that his name? It's really not so far. So and it's kind of like you want to go to the place where no one's. It's a place a lot of people have never been there. So it's kind of like I'm going on a field trip.
Excuse the interruption. Kemi, you, however, are you really are in love with a number of different areas throughout the city. And how do you make how do you make those choices? Like, we're going to go here, or we're going to go, or is it about getting closer to water, getting closer to tall buildings? How do you make those choices?
I'll contextualize that question by just talking about, very briefly about our programs and a change that we made earlier this year. So, again, referencing the name, the idea was we're a project, right? And we're kind of outgrowing that moniker a little bit, but, and really kind of rooting ourselves. We have two major programs, one of which is two-pronged. One is that we offer free and participatory art classes in and around Laundromat, and we work particularly on the Laundromat on 116th Street in Lenox for the last 4 years. So that's one. Then we have, that's called our Works in Progress program. Our Create Change program is our flagship program that we've been doing for a lot longer, since the very beginning in 2006. It has two parts. We basically commission artists to create a public art residency in their own neighborhood laundromat. We particularly focus on, and traditionally have focused on, artists of color working in communities of color. So they have been the Jackson Heights and Crown Heights and Sunset Park and Bed-Stuy and Harlem, Mott Haven, and a number of places, about 22 or so projects, or maybe I think it may be 25 now, between 2006 and last summer, 2012. These are 6-month residencies in the summer. Concurrent with that, over just the last 3 years, or 2 or 3 years, has been a professional development workshop that's open to all artists. And coming from all over the city and of all diversities. And it's a professional development series that lasts for over that same 6-month period, that offers a series of bi-weekly workshops for artists who want to learn how to do this kind of work. We're particularly focused on what we call socially relevant and socially engaged work. So very much about connecting neighbors, building social capital, and having a conversation as part of what one creates. So over those years, these 22, 23, 24 projects have been all over greater New York, from Yonkers to some of the neighborhoods I've mentioned. And particularly our professional development fellows have come from even wider kind of range. One of the things that I felt was really important coming in last fall was that for us to really have the kind of impact that we want to have, which again ties back to this idea of being engaged over time, socially engaged, and like really thinking about what matters to the communities we're working in, it felt like it was time to actually make some choices, as hard as that feels. And we've narrowed down our work to 3 anchor neighborhoods. So Hunts Point, which resonates with DUMBO physically, the descriptions of DUMBO and Red Hook as being kind of cut off by a Moses Highway, a little peninsula is one of them, and that we're working there for the first time. So that's the newest of the 3 neighborhoods, but our office is currently located in Hunts Point, and I've very much fallen in love with it as a neighborhood that I had never spent any time in until I started going there every day from my home in Brooklyn. And then the other 2 neighborhoods are Harlem and Bed-Stuy, both of which are neighborhoods that we've worked in since day one and have had a variety of different kind of programs over time. So what this opens up for us, even though it means we cut off some other kind of possibilities, is that we get to go a lot deeper in these neighborhoods. I'm spending time going to community board meetings. I'm helping, the Laundromat Project is helping plan the Fish Parade, which is one of the kickoff summer parade in Hunts Point. We did a walking tour at Restoration Plaza in Bed-Stuy. We're meeting people and we're able to say, I will be here tomorrow, I'll be here next month, I'll be here next year, which was not something we could say before. However, one of the joys of what we've done over this period, the last 8 years, this will be 8 this year, is that we have brought information and been able to discover and connect to communities all around the city. So the professional development workshops will continue to bring in, we'll have 15 artists this year coming from all over the city doing all kinds of different work. We have archivists, we have visual artists, we have musicians, etc. So we still have this incredible diversity of information that's coming, but at the same time we have these 3 anchors where we really get to go deeper and really connect and really begin to understand what it is that those communities want and what are the visions they hold for themselves and how can we participate in making those happen. So.
And Martin, it seems like you have the consummate freedom of the net. Is the net a neighborhood?
I guess that was also what we wanted to find out to begin with, and to be completely honest, it seems like our web project is pretty much mapping out the way the internet is being used right now. We have the fewest users from the African continent, we have the most from the United States, etc. And in this way, the Human Hotel project is so different from being online because you're staying with some real person. And and it actually doesn't work very well to kind of get hold of hosts online, because you're not inclined to get somebody you don't know staying with you just by some email. So we actually get the majority of all our hosts via sort of meetings with people, actually on the street, in some context like this. If anybody here are interested in having an amazing artist staying with them for a while on their couch, I mean, please join us. I mean, the project started out of necessity. 4 years ago in Copenhagen, the United Nations had their climate summit, the COP15. It was the last moment for the humankind to renegotiate the Kyoto Protocol for Copenhagen Protocol. It didn't happen. One of the reasons why the UN chose Copenhagen is that it looks very nice on paper. I mean, we are sweet, we have bicycles, we're not dangerous at all. But also Copenhagen is extremely small, it's very expensive, and this was in December, so it was very hard to, this was before the word occupy was so used, but you couldn't really occupy Copenhagen. So a year before the conference, you figured out that there was actually absolutely no room for the activist community to come. Every hotel, even in South Sweden, have been booked out by major corporations, ExxonMobil, Greenpeace, another big company, etc. So the people who are like grassroots activists couldn't come. So we started asking our friends' network if they wanted to host an activist, and it got some press, and it got bigger and bigger, and in the end we hosted more than 3,000 people, so they could actually come and stay locally. And it became a very interesting discussion also about this word activist, because it had been, when you say, do you want to have an activist staying, people are like, no. And they see this like 20-something black-clad young man with a stone. But I mean, we had amazing people staying with us. The one, I mean, I love this story. A 72-year-old woman from Peru. She had never left her village her whole life. She's coming to the summit to protest for indigenous rights. And she kept on saying, I'm an activist. And sure she was. She was just not that young man. And she stayed with her family in Copenhagen and completely destroyed it. Yeah, so it's almost the opposite of being online if it works well. So we'll see about New York. It's still pretty new here.
One of the things that this kind of leads me to ask of you is neighborhoods are indeed networks. They're probably the first kind of conceptual network that we had. I'm very curious about how you've been growing your own networks. Who are you looking to? Who's on a parallel road, or is it better if somebody's a contrarian who's moving away from what you hold central? Who are those people that you're learning from out there in the larger network? Do you want to take it, Dustin?
I mean, well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, communities, our neighborhoods. It goes outward. For me, I mean, the only reason I live in New York City is for the people. I mean, why else would you live in? I mean, you live in the middle of nowhere, right? With like a nice surf break and some vegetables and mangoes and, the sound of the sea. Yeah, things like this. So, the people. And I don't know, I'm getting on 20 years here, which really ages me, I feel like. I'm afraid of time. Time gets me. I mean, it's like the only thing that seems irreproducible, if that's a word. I think it's unreproducible. I like irreproducible. And so it's people. So over the years, you collect people, I guess, and those are your resources, and those are the people. I would have never gotten Pioneer Works. I had to go to people collecting my art and beg them, and they were writing big checks, like $250,000 checks, being like, "We'll take the art in 3 years," things like that. Just I know you need that work right now, so. And the reason I think it works as an institution is because of the people. So it's all about the people that we have bands like MGMT working in there, and artists, incredible, all these incredible artists, musicians, they're all there, and then each one is like, like Sylvia Plath did that nice drawing of the circle across the circle. I think a few people did. But, so all those, like us here, like after this whole thing, we're gonna be like, hello, I'm gonna talk to you, you're gonna be like, come over, and I'm gonna be like, come over, and you'll be like, come over. And Gabriel's gonna be like, hey, you come over, we're gonna ask you a bunch of questions. Everybody's like, hey, can I come over? And come on. And then, hey, I make this, and you make that, and what about that? Can I show that? I wanna play this. And then that's how everything happens. It's like when you meet a girl, right? I mean, that's how, it's like Red Hook is like just like a girl, right? You meet a girl, you have a baby, you're like, holy shit, this is my whole life.
So you should call it Intercourse. Keep the name, right?
Kemi, what kind of No, that was a very choreographed piece, I have to say. And I'm sure you will have a performance component at Intercourse. What kind of network do you find you need and that you're given to creating with the project?
Let's see. People certainly are quite central, and again, for us, making these commitments to these anchor neighborhoods are about being able to meet and continue to re-meet the same people over time. Like in our work in Harlem, giving these free art classes on 116th Street, over time, our staff and our teaching artists have watched children grow up and change and continue to want to participate in different families and church ladies, etc. So there's that sense of being rooted in a community and very specific people. And then there are some of the people that I look to when I'm thinking about, wow, what would it be like to do this work? What is doing this work really well and successfully? What are some of the models of what that might look like today? Or I was just reading the Rick Lowe Project Row Houses interview in the new Tom Finkelpearl book, and thinking very much about being committed to a place over time. And that's Project Row Houses. We're in that direct lineage. It is about that kind of connection to a place and wanting to be part of what makes that place better, and really wanting to listen to the people who are there about what it is that would make it better for them, right? But not leading, but being led by, or being listening very closely. It's part of what we hope we're doing and that we want to do better. There are organizations like Red Hook Initiative, which of course has been amazing post-Sandy, but has been doing amazing work for 10 years that I really think about as an organization that I find incredibly inspiring doing community-based work. But at the same time, thinking about, for us, we definitely believe that artists have a very particular point of view or way of approaching things in a very left of center way that are underused assets in communities, and that's part of what we're trying to activate, is like, hey, these are folks who can really help to address a problem in a way that we may not have thought about, right? So arts, thinking about creative time, which I think you mentioned, and kind of the idea of what does an artist journalist look like? That's something that's interesting to me on a community-based level. There are other organizations that are kind of passing through too quickly in my head, but very much kind of like, how do we think about different models that we bring to doing this kind of work, and being constantly open to what that might look like? It's something that I'm really, I feel like is the only way to do our work.
No, it's a necessity now. You really can't avoid it. And I know our increasing relationship with our neighbors on the Lower East Side is completely enriching and in many ways changing the nature of the institution. Lisa, how much time do you spend listening?
A lot. But I think I spend a lot of time listening, but I think I spend a lot of more time talking. And by that I mean connecting people, being the cheerleader for a local gallery, for a show that I've seen, for whatever's going on in the neighborhood. Because if you don't have the information, if you can't get the information out, where's your audience? And we're all, whatever you're doing, you're looking for an audience. And audience building requires a lot of legwork, a lot of soapboxing, a lot of passing around and sharing the information. So I do spend a lot of time talking. I'm a big, hey, person A meet person B, and I think you guys can do beautiful things together. Have a good time. Go to Intercourse and do whatever you want to do. So I do a lot of that, and I think in this neighborhood in particular, and from my own experience, what's important for me in terms of thinking about networking, it's about bringing people to our side, and by our side I mean to the art side, right? So people think that art is a rarefied language and only a few know how to speak it. So if you can get more and more people to understand that art is not elite, that art is not something that's separate or for somebody special, that you can engage in art and find art in the most interesting places, that you can be a consumer of art, then you're going to get more commitment and more, you build your audience. So,
and you will be consumed.
I hope so.
Now, Dustin, it sounded earlier like you were really trying to rapidly put together a bureaucracy to move your vision forward. What kind of, I mean, it's so, and bureaucracies tend to impose themselves on others. What kind of bureaucracy are you trying to put together to make your vision a reality?
That'll give me money. No, I mean, we got to raise a lot of money.
No, you mentioned some people who you were asking to audit a board level.
I think we got to raise, a bunch of money to endow this institution and to hire a director and to staff it and to all these little details like insurance and public coding and all these things that are going into it. So the cultural capital, I feel like we have. I mean, we have that coming out of our ears just through the nature of the people involved in the project and our friends. So, I mean, we want to keep it as free and crazy as it can be, but at the same time, we need to get it funded. So, for me, I guess I think about just how to get it funded. Like, are we going to get it from Google? Are we going to get it from Vice? I'm of this optimistic nature of the same people who are purchasing my work are, extraordinarily wealthy, so maybe just one billionaire is going to be like, wow, this is so cool, here's 50 million. I'm pretty optimistic. I think that might happen. But so the bureaucracy is really like...
Are you in favor of higher taxes for the rich?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, I think so. I'm all about that kind of thing. But I like Mitch Hedberg a lot. You guys like Mitch Hedberg? Yeah, Mitch. But he was like, so I guess I really just want the greatest advisors possible to bring the greatest brain trust possible to the project so that it can go forward in the best way.
But have you created anything, or will you create something where you must listen to what they're telling you?
Absolutely. Yeah. No. We have board meetings already, and I'm always like I'm like, think of me as like I'm not here. Like I want to be there and be like, yeah, I'll bring this person, I'll bring that. Oh, that's a good idea. Or what about this show? What about that? But I'm like, yeah, I don't. In a sense, I don't want to be. I want to like make the vision, but I need to make my art, and I need to make some babies one day, and I need to make like a family. I got a lot of things I want to try. I'm trying to learn how to surf a little bit. So I look at it like a social sculpture, and it's going to be entrusted to a group of people, and eventually a director who will answer to that group of people. I guess like institutions work, and that's what we're trying to do, as far out of the box as possible.
Right. You're doing such a great impression of Forrest Gump.
He's cool. He's cool. Mitch Hedberg was like, he's like, I like nice hotels. He's like, I met a girl at the front desk, and she gave me her phone number. It was 0. I tried calling her, but somebody else answered. I was like, you sound so much older.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'd like to say thank you, fromage.
Kemi, now you're working with what I still have no idea whether you're going for a traditional structure or just showing up for the meetings and causing them to scratch their heads. Kemi, I'm sure you're working within a much more traditional framework without being aligned to the traditional.
Yes, about the bureaucracy question.
Yes.
So my own particular history with the organization is that I was on the startup board for about 4.5 years, stepped off to go to graduate school, and then ended up back here as, you know, first full-time and paid executive director in an entirely different role at a moment when the organization has made a commitment to we actually want to be around for a little while, right? So, you know, we were testing things out for the first few years. Will this work? Will artists respond? Will communities respond? Does anyone want this? You know, we're still here, and we're making a good go of things. We have a 5-member board, one of whom is an alum of our Create Change program. She was in our second class of artists. Our founder is now the board chair, so continues to be very committed to the organization and brings that kind of long-term, you know, commitment and vision. And then we have a couple of folks who are a lot newer and have different. Everyone is so, and this really is true. Everyone is really committed and really engaged and really has wonderful ideas. And now it's about trying to figure out how do we really take this organization to the next place, and really trying to clarify and codify is how I put it. So we tested a number of things for a number of years, and some things have really stuck, and like, let's do that better and do it deeper and like figure it out. And then other things, maybe that didn't work out. Or, hey, we used to work in several different neighborhoods, but maybe we need 3 anchor neighborhoods now. And I didn't explain that in those 3 anchor neighborhoods, that's where we'll do our residencies and that's where we'll do our workshops, as opposed to kind of doing them all over the
On a yearly basis, or?
Yes.
Yes.
So for now, it's over the summer. Our high season is May through October. And hopefully, one of the things I'd love to do is actually build out a 12-month calendar of activities. We're, you know, working with an amazing film that just won the Sundance Jury Prize in documentary called American Promise, which follows 2 young black boys from K through 12th grade right here in the city. And we're building an arts-based curricula, kind of thinking about media perception of young boys and like using that as a lens to talk about equity issues, education equity issues. So we're at a point where we're really, you know, kind of stretch and play and like figure out, but within a context where it's like, okay, here's a much firmer structure, and how do we now build out and deepen what we do within those structures.
And Martin, who, within your organization, who is there? Do you have a board of advisors? Do you have a board for governance?
I mean, it's pretty much the dictatorship. It's me and Sixten, and we are Wulu to begin with. So in this way, it's very much an art practice. So we decide what happens in the social sculpture. However, each project gets a lot of people involved, and you can't do anything on your own that's of much value in this arena. So for example, with the website, we work with a great programmer called Russell, who's been there since the beginning, and I feel that it's almost the opposite of bureaucracy. I mean, you have to make sure that the site works with the new version of Chrome, but apart from that, you need to just make sure to give away everything, because if it works for other people, then they will use it. I mean, this community idea is thrown around all the time, and it's almost always a lie. But if somebody really uses your project when you're not even there, when I'm asleep, somebody in Japan signs up and uses the website. I mean, 30 people a day signs up right now, so it's like it's alive, you know. In the beginning, it was 5 people, including me and my mom, you know. So it really, I mean, so it became a community, you know, also by stepping away all the time.
Okay, great. I think now my timekeeper has informed me that I need to wrap it up. I want to ask just one last question before we turn it over to our neighbors in the audience, and that is, I mean, what is the big goal for each of you with your organization? I'm going to go back. It's
The big goal. I mean, I don't know if there's one particular goal. I think it's to change the world through the people, and to bring the people together to do that, and to create new ideas by bringing disciplines together that may not traditionally be next to each other, because this world seems to be so specialized at our universities, at jobs, everywhere. It's like, so we're trying to break all those walls and barriers down and bring all these people together, and through that create change, and whether that's social change or whether that's aesthetics or philosophical or whatnot. The idea is to so that maybe humans can get out of the shit they're in and move forward as a group, because we got all these problems like religion and countries. I think are two big ones. Like imagine if we didn't have any religion, we didn't argue about God, and we didn't argue about like borders. Yeah, if we were like, well, that's Africa and that's France and there's all of that was gone, and we just looked at it like one species, which is what it is. I think we'd be like 500 years ahead of where we are now. So if we can somehow change the consciousness of the people, whether it's through art or science or any of these things, then I think we would be in a whole, it's bananas to me. And people say, oh, well, you gotta have countries, because what about culture? What about, well, it's all stories, it's all art, they're just stories, right? So the stories are gonna go on. So I guess we're making stories. I guess we're just gonna continue to make stories, like songs.
You want a better story, and I couldn't agree more. Kemi?
I like that ending on that story. The power of narrative is really resonant, particularly with the kinds of communities that we're working in, where sometimes that actually isn't something that's available to folks. I think of the work that the Laundromat Project does as really about kind of igniting the creative capacity that already exists in communities and connecting folks who identify as artists with those who may not identify as such and don't have to, but can still participate in creating that better world together by having that part of themselves that's creative be valued, welcomed, and actually kind of drawn out. And we work in places like laundromats and other everyday spaces because we want to connect with folks who are not going to walk to the art center, not going to go to a place that is, kind of marked as art, but still have that capacity. So I really think about our work as seeding and building a creative, what I'm calling a creative core, so CRPS, so like Peace Corps, on a neighborhood level, and we're particularly working with artists through some of our programs, and our artists are kind of moving around the city and the world in really different and interesting ways. Sonia Louise Davis, I think, is here. She was one of our fellows a couple of years ago, and she's going to be on residence on 116th Street from river to river this summer. So look out for that. That's something amazing that we're really excited for her and proud that we were part of her journey a couple of years ago. So thinking about how we're planting these seeds across the city that are very much hopefully will pop up in interesting ways over time.
Thanks. Martin?
Yeah, I believe that what artists do best is slow down things. I think good art can help to slow things down, and I think we need that a lot. I think we do too much, and we buy too much, and we eat too much, especially in America. And I think that that when you make people meet each other, you kind of have to slow down for a minute and relate to this other person who is in a way yourself. And that's maybe the best contribution an artist can do, trying to slow things down in a really beautiful way.
Lisa?
The goal. The goal certainly is to make sure that this neighborhood and this city stays alive and vibrant with all the full range of creators and creatives, and that these creators and creatives can find sustainability for their own lives and for their organizations and that it's not, that it doesn't continue to be a struggle to find audiences, to find funding, to spread the message for what they do, that it should be par for the course that people who have excellent creative endeavors should be congratulated and should be able to do what they do and have the space to do that.
And me, I'd like to see a world where people, the children in particular, have a space to think before they have to react. I think one of the things we found out tonight is that resilience is, in the words of our former First Lady, it takes a village. And now we'll open it up to our village here and take questions if anyone has them. Yes?
I have two questions. One is, with the laundromats, do you actually make relationships with the laundromat owners, or are they kind of guerrilla acts, or is one in there? That's my one question. And then my other question is for Lisa. Two Trees is moving into Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and the Galapagos Sugar Factory. And it's an interesting, very different situation than the way the London family came in here. It's an existing artist community, and I'm wondering if your reach will extend there.
Is that Jenny?
Yes.
Hi, Jenny. Do you want to answer first? You mean
Did people hear the question? No. Maybe just repeat it. Yes.
I'm sorry, I forgot I'm supposed to restate the questions, but I'm going to ask you to restate your question.
So Jenny Dixon in the audience there, Noguchi Museum, everybody go there, is asking me about Two Trees' recent acquisition of the Domino Sugar Factory and the development that's going to be happening there. And are you asking me about my?
Well, I'm just curious if there's going to be an art that
Sure.
anything that's going to go on as it's helpful to the community to be able to help sustain that.
Very much so, and Richard asked about it earlier with this notion of mixed use. And if you consider, you know, DUMBO is basically the best kind of real life case study and let's say a practice run for what is possible in Domino. When you look at the original plan from, I think it was Vignoli was the architect, the original plan that had been approved by the city and that could be built today, is a series of glass and steel structure, basically residential towers on that plot, cutting off the neighborhood, making just a waterfront neighborhood, a very private neighborhood, and they were all residential buildings that were planned for that site. What Two Trees is doing now, and the plans have become public, it's in the news and will eventually go for public review process, is Two Trees has re-envisioned what Domino could be. And they've actually, the plan is to reduce the amount of residential space and give over more to commercial space to have that daytime, nighttime presence. Also they've added about 2 acres of parkland to the space by reducing the actual physical footprint and mass of some of the buildings, and reconnecting the waterfront to the street so that rather than the waterfront being just a private backyard or front yard to the people who live there, the waterfront would be accessible to the larger community. There have been some public presentations. There's been months of community feedback and dialogue that the project team has been working on, and you'll start to see more news of it. I mean, this is a project you're not going to see anything built there for another 10, 15 years. But please read up about it. There's a really interesting design.
And in the meantime, if you're in the neighborhood, visit the Socrates Sculpture Park, which is one of our most wonderful urban resources.
Socrates is near the Noguchi Museum and not near the Domino buildings, which I believe you were saying, correct?
It was a mindless plug. I love the place. I like Central Park too, and that's not very.
other question was whether our laundromat activities are kind of guerrilla style or in fact laundromat owners and workers are partners, and it is definitely the latter. We work there for 5 to 6 months, and it is about building that relationship. Part of what we're doing is actually encouraging artists, in this case, and our organization as well, to build these lasting relationships with, you know, the small business, laundromats are small business owners, and the people who work there are often, you know, living close by or part of that larger, or part of that community. They're doing their work day and sometimes all the time. They're not always the most willing participants initially, but we do win them over time and consider that to be one of part of what we're doing. So again, building social capital and making connections where connections may not have existed before.
What role does government funding play in building resilience? Thank you. Bringing it back home.
For anyone.
I think in New York City, a huge role. We have the biggest arts and culture funding in the country. So in New York, we give a lot of credit to the current administration, which I have to confess I used to work for. So. But I think it's huge, and it has to come from the top down. Government has to give money for arts and culture. I mean, somebody was asking about taxing the rich earlier, and there are now these organizations in cities where there are art taxes coming up. That's a great fucking idea. Let's tax people so that they can be integrated into the support for the arts.
Seattle and Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, I can say, within my own context at the museum, that city government, we are in need of constant care and feeding from city government and many, many different agencies. And when you go through something like Idea City, which lasts over days and goes fairly deep into the evening, the number of agencies that you have to go through is formidable. And you have to keep submitting and more backup. But at the same time, the city is a willing participant, you know, and we've had like a wonderful relationship with the police department during that time, but also SAPO's office is very important to helping us negotiate what we can and cannot do, with the neighbors always paramount in mind.
Yeah, totally. I mean, where I'm from, we still have the National Endowment for the Arts, and sometimes it saddens me to see how people sometimes in the US seems to forget that we can still want that back, that it should come back, that it should be there, that we don't just have to be nice to rich people who pays for the elevator and get their name up there, you know? I mean, that's part of culture. Of course, we need it.
Ditto everything. And we are signers to the 1% for culture. So.
We have a question over the top.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hey guys.
How's
See you all.
Hi, my name is Danae Hanna, and I'm the founder of a project called Dance Like a Startup. And we're looking at applying startup methodology to young arts organizations to see if it can make them more agile and adaptable to their, and responsive to their audience. And I found a lot of people that I'm working with, other people in their 20s in my community, they're very transient. They might have gone to school and then they left their home and then they stay in their new city, but there's a constant moving around. And I want to know, what advice would you have for people working with building like in communities that are transient, so that move often or are not specific to a geographic location? No, to anyone.
Well, transience is such, I'm not sure I will have anything that's, you know, brings it on home and make it particularly resonant, but hopefully. Transience is such a part of modern life and city life. And in fact, I was doing an information session for our professional development fellows earlier this year, and someone said, you know, one of our questions is that we ask applicants is, what's your connection to your neighborhood? What kinds of investments have you made, whether it's time or resources or ideas or whatever the case may be, trying to make that a wide open question. And if you don't have, well, if you have not made any investments in your community, why not, or how do you see this changing that? And one of the people who was, ended up applying said, yeah, I just live there, just where I sleep. I haven't ever asked that question, and actually saw it as an opportunity to kind of think about that. And you don't have to do this forever. It doesn't, you know, one of the things that we're really interested in is looking around and taking a moment to make a connection and feeling like that's important to kind of be present where you are for the time that you're there, but it doesn't mean that you have to be in that same place 6 months from now, but carrying the sense of where I am and being able to connect to other people in this space is important. It's something that we value. I'm not saying that everybody has to value that, but certainly when we're working with artists and when we're talking to folks in the way that we approach the world, that is what we hope we're instilling is that sense of presence, so, or encouraging. This can't be good.
Thank you.
Are there any other burning questions?
A simmering question? My name is Jill. I work at a place called Issue Project Group in Brooklyn, and we're actually a Two Trees organization, and I just wanted to kind of give some feedback about the experience. We have doubled our membership to the Food Care. We were in a very, very remote location in Gowanus, and now we're here. Every subway, everybody lives here, everyone works here, it's wonderful. And we have a beautiful space. It used to be the old Board of Education building, same architecture as Grand Central. It's gorgeous, and we love it, and it would not be happening without their support. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you. Well, but I also think that, you know, I want Two Trees to get a lot of credit, and the Walentis family is the family that, you know, has been maligned for, you know, for years, and they, you know, you get this sort of air of like the assumption that they're an evil developer, but that they're not actually, and I think case in point here in this neighborhood. But what I want to say also, it's a big partnership. It's a partnership with city government. It's a partnership with the community, with a partnership with arts organizations, and it was all those factors coming together to make this happen. And you need patronage, you need government, you need community support. But thank you.
Kemi, you want the last word?
Just because this conversation is so important and it is part of a series of conversations at MAS and various other places, I did want to just mention to people that the Naturally Occurring Cultural Districts Working Group has a citywide forum that's going to take place on May 30th that's called From the Neighborhoods Up, and it's about how arts connects to all, you know, creative industries, health and sustainability, incubation, economic resilience, and all these conversations. So this just seems like the kind of crowd that will probably be interested in that, so I wanted to say that.
Yes. Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. I'm Ann Coates from MAS. And I want to thank Lisa and Martin, Kemi, Dustin, and Richard. This was great. Thanks again to the Department of Cultural Affairs for supporting this, and to the World Policy Institute. And again, it's so nice to see all of you. I hope to see you at one of our next events. As Vin said, we have a heavy lineup this spring. And if you can, please stay and join us for some wine at the bar. Thanks. Night.